Travelers have reported being detained at the U.S. border even though they had valid travel visas.
A real estate attorney, an American citizen returning from Canada, says that he was detained without explanation.
An authoritarian overreach and a billionaire-backed agenda.
Hey guys, I'm Liam. In this video, I'm going to tell you all you need to know about visiting the USA and the state of Utah to have the trip of a lifetime. I'm also going to dive into some of my first impressions and experiences in the USA, so stick around to the end of the video because it gets a little messy. I'm not going to lie, hearing all the stories happening at the US border right now had me a little nervous. After all, American border officers can literally make up any old reason to go through your phone, your laptop. I mean, it's not like I got anything to hide, but it's just a bit of a crazy experience if it does happen, you know what I mean? They can also detain you and question you as long as they like, as long as they think they have a good reason. But I wasn't going to pass on an opportunity to visit one of the most stunning places on the planet, Utah. You've probably heard about it, but there's a lot more to Utah than Mormons and Salt Lake City. So with that, let's get into it, shall we? This is your ultimate guide to visiting the state of Utah. Alright, before we get into the good stuff, let's talk a bit about actually getting into the USA. When it comes to immigration, you got to be prepared for those long lines and those infamous border officers. With the current political climate in the US, immigration is pretty hectic, but honestly, you don't need to worry about it. Most of the stories you hear about in the media are less than a fraction of a percent of what is happening at the border right now, so I don't think there's a good cause for mass panic right now. One thing you're definitely going to need is an ESTA, which is a visa waiver for people who are traveling from other countries like me. I'll leave the link below, go check it out. Make sure you apply online well before you travel to the US and make sure that you are accepted and approved and everything will go smoothly for you. I promise. And lastly, the other thing you definitely don't want to forget about organizing is travel insurance. Do not skip travel insurance when going to the US. We've all heard about it, right? The healthcare system over there is a nightmare. To avoid an expensive bill, which this did actually happen to me, I ended up having to take my partner to the hospital while we were over there. So you definitely want to make sure you have travel insurance for this, because if we didn't, it would have been a hefty bill. Okay, so I want to briefly talk about how long you need to do Utah justice. I would say to plan for at least 7 days. This is for the major stops and maybe a few things in between. If you really want to make sure that you get your fix in Utah of all the amazing places on offer, I would definitely say 10 to 14 days is a much safer bet, especially if you're planning to do some of those permitted hikes. You're going to want to be flexible with your dates a little bit to allow for extra time for you to actually get those permits. The best time to visit Utah, in my opinion, is spring. In spring, most of Utah is snow-free, the crowds are still pretty low because it's shoulder season, and you're likely to get mild temperatures during the day. The only downside is that the nights can still be a little bit chilly, and I definitely felt this while I was there, especially because I was camping out of my car. I would completely avoid summer. It's the height of the tourist season. It is hot as hell. It's not uncommon for temperatures to hit and exceed 100 Fahrenheit, which is like 37 degrees Celsius. What the f? If you really do want to go during summer though, just make sure you have plenty of water. And I mean, this goes for any time of year because during the day in spring and autumn and even winter, it can still get pretty warm and it's a very dry kind of heat. So you're going to need lots of water. Just like spring, autumn / fall is also a great time to visit Utah because the temperatures are milder and again, it's shoulder season, there's less people around. But I would still say spring is better because at most of the national parks, there's around 25% less people in spring than there is in autumn. So the shoulder season is definitely better in spring. Now, while most of Utah could be considered a desert, during the winter, it snows a lot. Once again, I would completely avoid a road trip in Utah unless you are like a photographer and you really want to get those really cool snowy shots at like Bryce Canyon or something. Otherwise, avoid Utah in winter. The temperature is freezing and a lot of roads and trails will be closed because of the weather. Now, America is also extremely expensive. Coming from New Zealand, the exchange rate is almost double what it is here, which, I mean, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically what I'm trying to say is that my New Zealand dollars only go half as far as they would back at home. And that's even accounting for the exchange rate. I would say this is most apparent when it comes to buying food, especially eating out, when you add on the extra taxes and tipping. Honestly, I do not know how people survive there. Like, the cost is astronomical. So be prepared for that. To try and keep costs down, it's essential to have a really good travel card. Now, I know most people will just use their debit or credit card overseas that they'd use at home, but this can bring on a bunch of foreign transaction fees that can really add up. So my favorite thing to do is use Wise. Now, this is not sponsored in any way. I genuinely use Wise every time I go overseas because They have the best conversion rates and there's no hidden random transaction fees. Definitely look into getting a Wise card. I'll leave the link down below. Now, this is probably the best hack to know about. You do not want to be paying for the national parks individually because you're going to be coming in and out of the national parks, which means you're going to have to pay every single time that you go in. Once you've done this 2 or 3 times, it adds up to almost the same amount as buying an annual pass anyway. So what I would suggest is going and buying the annual pass as soon as you get there, which is about 100 USD. Then you'll be able to go in and out of the national parks as many times as you want. Now, America isn't particularly well known for its public transport because it's pretty much non-existent. So if you want to do it justice, you're going to want to rent a car. Now, you could also rent a camper van to try and keep those accommodation costs low, but I found the price difference between a camper van and a car to be huge. It is so much cheaper to rent a car, especially if you're looking for 4-wheel drive, which I would highly recommend in Utah. You're going to be paying a lot if you want a 4-wheel drive camper van. So I have another little hack for you guys. If you want to rent a car and still keep accommodation costs low, you can actually also do gear rental. So I went to Base Camp Outdoor Gear in Las Vegas and I got everything I needed for hiking and camping for the 2 to 3 weeks that I was in the US. Basically, they provided me with a tent, sleeping bags, pillows, stuff to cook with, everything you could possibly think of, they have it, and they can customize their packages to fit your needs. So that's what I did, especially in states like Utah where there's dispersed camping everywhere. This is essentially free camping on what is known as BLM land, and often there are no restrictions. You can just pitch a tent. You don't need a camper van or a self-contained vehicle. So yeah, when it comes to renting a car, I would highly prioritize 4-wheel drive if you want to see the best places in Utah. And if that means trading off the costs like it did for me of a camper van, then I would definitely prioritize 4-wheel drive. The other thing to expect in America is that the cars are massive, okay? They're just huge. So just be prepared for that. The other thing to note, America drive on the left side of the road, which is the opposite side of the road to us. So again, just be prepared for that. I didn't find it that difficult, honestly. Your brain switches around after a few days. All right, and the last section before we get into the actual itinerary for the trip, where are you gonna stay? Like I alluded to earlier, dispersed camping is everywhere and it's free. Basically, you can find Bureau of Land Management or BLM land almost everywhere in Utah and beyond. And there's often no restrictions. You can just park up and sleep in your car, camper van. Obviously the downside is there's no facilities, there's no toilets, nothing like that. So you're gonna wanna take care of your business during the day, at gas stations, when you're on the road, that sort of thing. When you visit the parks, there's always toilets in the national parks. So yeah, just be prepared for that sort of thing. Honestly, I think this is the way to go. It just cuts your costs down so much and it's kind of fun. If that's not for you, there are some other options. There are more luxury RV style campgrounds where, you know, you can get your standard powered site or unpowered site or just a tent site. A lot of them will even have cabins and things as well. What I did was I broke up my dispersed camping. Every few days we'd stay in an Airbnb or one of these more luxury style RV campgrounds so that, you know, we could shower, have access to basic facilities every now and again. And yeah, it worked out really well. There's also campgrounds in the state and national parks which are a lot cheaper. So they're kind of the in between the RV campgrounds and the dispersed camping. And they'll often have facilities and like campfires, picnic tables, that sort of thing. The only downside is that they book out quite far in advance. So I would highly recommend, if you want to go with that option, that you look into it 3 to 6 months before you actually start your trip. And finally, it's America, so there's lots of hotels and motels for different budgets, whether you want to go in the flea motel on the side of the highway or the Hilton. As I said before, there's also Airbnbs, so whatever kind of travel suits you, you can find it in the US. All right, let's get into the good part. So basically what I'm going to do here is just go over my itinerary, which is what I recommend to you guys. At the end, I'll go through some of my first impressions and experiences and things to look out for while you're in America. Most people visit Utah to do the Mighty 5. This is a list of 5 incredible national parks that are located within the state, and they're actually quite close together, so you can do a loop around them and start and end in Las Vegas or Salt Lake City. However, there's some equally epic locations that aren't in the national parks, and I'll go over some of these as well. So after flying into LA from New Zealand, I then headed on to Las Vegas. It serves as a great base because it's, you know, it's a big city, it's a great place to stock up on supplies, and I'd highly recommend doing that because while Utah isn't exactly a remote state, the towns are pretty small, so you might find that a lot of the stores you need are few and far between. Now, my number 1 tip for visiting Vegas: leave
as soon as possible.
In all honesty, I hate Vegas. Got up at 5 a.m. this morning, just made it to the top of Scout's Lookout, and now it's time to climb up Angel's Landing. Your first stop is going to be Zion National Park. Zion is full of the most impossibly beautiful landscapes. It has incredible hiking and amazing campgrounds, and it's not hard to see why it's named after the Promised Land. And did you know it's actually the second most popular national park in the USA? Nearly 5 million people visited Zion last year. That's more than the Grand Canyon. The most important thing to know about Zion National Park is that the Zion Canyon Scenic Drive, which is the way to the most famous hikes like Angel's Landing and the Narrows, is closed to vehicles from March to November. During this time, access operates via a shuttle system. However, I do have a hack to get around this. Rent a bike. I know, can you believe it? You can actually rent a bike and do some awesome biking in America, of all places. There are heaps of bike and e-bike options around the park, especially in Springdale, which is right at the park's entrance. And by renting a bike, you can explore Zion at your own pace. You can go to any trail you want at any time. This is actually how I managed to hike up to the top of Angel's Landing before 7 a.m, which is when the shuttles start, and have the entire place to myself. And you also just get to see Zion from a different perspective. There's actually a trail along the Virgin River, which is a biking and walking trail, and it's just got stunning views. So I spent around 3 days in Zion National Park, which I would say is a really good amount of time to spend here. I didn't hike the Narrows, but I did do Angel's Landing. And just a quick note on those, the permit system for both Angel's Landing and the Narrows operates on a lottery. There's 2 lotteries, an advanced lottery and a daily lottery, and both of them run through the National Park Service website. Now, the chances you actually get a permit are extremely slim, and this is why I'd recommend planning a few days in your itinerary that you are flexible with, so that you can increase your chances as much as possible to win a permit, because these are bucket list hikes, and if you get the chance to do them, you absolutely should. Now, at the time of this video, it costs $6 USD each time you enter the lottery, so just keep that in mind when you are budgeting for this trip. Now, some other things you can do in Zion National Park are the walk out to Observation Point, or driving the Zion to Mount Carmel Highway, which is, oh, it's amazing, guys. Honestly, it's probably one of the most beautiful drives I've ever done. So I would highly, highly recommend driving up the Zion Mount Carmel Highway at least once while you're there. It was so good, I did it twice. And the other thing I'd recommend is going for a bike ride along the Paris Trail. This is the main trail that leads into the park from Springdale, and it will take you up the Zion Canyon Scenic Drive, which allows you to visit a bunch of different hikes. Behind me is the largest collection of hoodoos in the world. This is Bryce Canyon National Park. Let's go check it out. I have to say, I think this is my favorite national park from the entire trip. It boasts the largest collection of hoodoos in the world, which, if you have no idea what those are, they're basically just those giant rock stacks you see all over the landscape. I only spent 1 day here, and that is enough, but it's so beautiful. I wish I'd spent more just taking it all in. I would highly recommend getting up before sunrise here and driving out to Inspiration Point, where you'll walk along the rim of the park to Sunset Point. During this walk, you'll be able to take in the sunrise and the amazing glow on the rocks before you get to Sunset Point, where you can start the Navajo Loop Trail, which is probably the most famous hike in the park. It takes around 2 hours, and it's a little bit steep, but you'll get to walk amongst some of the most amazing hoodoos in the park, like Thor's Hammer and Wall Street. After Bryce Canyon, you're going to head to the city of Moab. Now, Moab is quite literally next door to not just 1, but 2 national parks. Today I'm in a place with over 2,000 natural arches made from sandstone. The most important thing about visiting Arches National Park is that from this year, the National Park Service is operating a timed entry system. So if you're visiting between April and October, you're going to need to book a permit in advance, and this is separate to your National Parks Pass. You basically just pick a time slot to enter the park online. It only costs $2 USD, and you can book up to 6 months in advance. It doesn't seem to be too competitive in my experience, especially during the shoulder season, but if you do get caught out, there is a second batch of tickets released every day at 7 p.m. for the following day. Now, I only spent half a day exploring Arches, which in hindsight was a terrible decision. I would recommend planning at least 2 days here because there is just so much to see. And even though it's a small park, there's so many amazing hiking trails that take you around all the different arches. The other thing to note is that most of the trails are short and pretty flat, aside from Delicate Arch, which is a decent climb and takes about 1 to 2 hours to return. So if you really want to, you can stack up a bunch of these in one day. Now, Delicate Arch is the most popular trail for good reason, but you're also going to want to check out the Devil's Garden area, which is home to Landscape Arch, and also the Windows section, which has Double Arch and the Turret. I'm here on the Island in the Sky, which is part of Canyonlands National Park in southern Utah. let's go check it out. This is the less popular of the two parks in Moab, but honestly, I think it's super underrated. There are 3 districts in the park that people can visit, and I spent one day exploring the Island in the Sky district. It contains that famous sunrise spot, Mesa Arch, which is a 30 to 45 minute hike, but beware, it is busy, especially if you go at sunrise. Now, there isn't many other places to hike here, but there are heaps of viewpoints where you can take a look out at the stunning landscapes of Canyonlands, and I would highly recommend visiting at least one of them for sunset. My favorite was the Green River Overlook. There were just so many layers of canyons and cliffs, it felt like another world. A couple of other spots are Grandview Point and Schaefer Canyon Overlook, which are both equally as incredible, but I didn't like them as much as Green River Overlook. Alright, so we've done 4 out of the mighty 5, but we're gonna go on a little side quest now. We're going to be heading to a bustling metropolis called Hanksville, population 170. Now, a quick disclaimer, you will definitely need a 4-wheel drive vehicle if you're going on this side quest. This tiny town hits hard in the otherworldly landscapes department. In fact, I'd say it's the most underrated place in Utah, and perhaps even the Southwest. First up, I would head out to Factory Butte. There's a bunch of places where you can do off-roading here, but for the most part, there's a gravel road that is pretty easy to navigate. From Factory Butte, you should also head out to Moonscape Overlook, which is only another 10 minutes or so, and it has this incredible lunar landscape. There's also heaps of dispersed camping around here if you want to stay the night. Another spot you want to check out is the aptly named Long Dong. This one is a little harder to find, so I'll leave a link in the description to a blog with directions. Shout out to Oceanus Adventure for that one. It's another otherworldly spot that honestly feels like it's out of a Star Wars movie, and a lot of people still don't know about it, so definitely check it out. Then there's the Bentonite Hills, which are located near the Mars Research Station. Yes, that's right, this place is so otherworldly that even NASA is here doing some research because apparently the environment is just like the one found on Mars. That is wild. Now, this is another one that can be a little bit tricky to get to, so I'll leave another link to Oceanus Adventure's blog down below, and this is another dispersed camping spot, so again, if you want to stay the night like I did, go for it. Finally, the last place that's worth checking out near Hanksville is Goblin Valley State Park. It has a bunch of these weird looking hoodoos, which I guess is why it's called Goblin Valley State Park. But my favorite part by far is the cave called the Goblin's Lair. It's a short hike, and you can even rappel down into it if you get a permit from the visitor center. All up, I spent around 3 days in Hanksville, but you can definitely condense it down into 2 days and still see all of these spots. Alright, now we're going back to Earth to finish up our Mighty 5 Utah road trip. Today I'm in one of America's least visited national parks, and it's also one of the last places to ever be mapped by American explorers. I would allow about 2 days to explore Capitol Reef, and definitely get yourself a 4-wheel drive vehicle for this one because it is stunning when you head down Cathedral Valley. A pit stop that I'd say is worth checking out is Gifford Farm. It has this amazing shot of a barn in front of some really cool cliffs, and I'd also check out Hickman Bridge, which is this huge natural arch made out of rock, and it's a pretty decent hike at about 30 to 45 minutes return. Quite honestly though, the best part of Capitol Reef National Park is driving through Cathedral Valley. It takes about 4 to 5 hours to get from one end to the other, but a lot of it is on BLM land, so as long as you stay outside the national park borders, you can actually camp here overnight. The first major stop is going to be the Temple of the Sun and Moon, and definitely check this one out because the rock formations here are so cool. Then as you continue heading through Cathedral Valley, you're going to see more and more of these stunning rock formations that have been carved out of the surrounding cliffs. The viewpoint at the end of the valley took my breath away. Definitely stop there. It's marked on the map as Upper Cathedral Valley Overlook, and it's a slight detour, but it is worth it. Alright, that brings us to the end of our Utah road trip. From here, you can head up to Salt Lake City or back to Las Vegas. Now, I promised I'd talk about some of my first impressions and experiences while here, and I just want to start out by saying that while immigration is a little bit sketchy and scary at the moment, for the most part, people are still getting through the borders and having an amazing time in America. My own personal experience, the border agent was extremely friendly and just had a few questions about my trip, like where I was going and where I was staying. You know, that standard kind of thing you get from most border agents around the world. It sort of feels like when you're there that everyone's kind of walking on eggshells around each other, but once you get to talk to somebody, you'll realize that most people are actually super friendly. Most people just really want to get into a conversation with you, and as an introverted New Zealander, this wasn't my vibe, but there's something to be said about the friendliness of Americans. Now, the other reality is the politics. It's not as brazen as you might think. I mean, you're going to see some flags on cars and things like that, but for the most part, people just keep it to themselves. Now let's talk about guns.
My name is Mel Bernstein, and they call me the most armed man in America.
I didn't see any guns. Well, I did see guns on police officers, but aside from police officers, I didn't see any guns. Now, I saw some apparel here and there, something about God gave us guns, so we're gonna use them, yada, yada, yada. My God, that's so American. But yeah, I felt quite safe actually, and I was camping in a tent on the side of the road pretty much every single night and no issues. Something else I noticed is that every single town just looks the same. Every main street looks exactly the same. It's this row of fast food restaurants like Taco Bell and McDonald's, you know, the classic American fast food places. It's kind of sad and overwhelming, but at the same time, I guess it's a cultural experience. Something that I could not stand though is the toilets. I do not understand why the public toilets have these huge gaps around the doors. The toilet bowl itself is like really wide, really low down, and there's always this weird gap in the front of it. Like, I don't understand. And I know I'm getting worked up about toilets, but this one really got to me, guys. Finally, the other thing I noticed was just the advertising is insane. I mean, what do you expect? It's the capitalist mecca of the world. You'll see giant, massive, flashing billboards for accident lawyers, surprisingly even real niche ones like hotel accident lawyers. And especially around the border with Nevada, you're gonna see a lot of billboards advertising gambling because you can just cross state lines and suddenly it's super legal. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this video. I just wanna say a huge, huge thanks for watching this, and if you made it all the way through to the end, thank you so much. I really love having you guys here. I really love talking to you guys about this stuff. So leave any questions you have about Utah in the comments below. And please remember to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel if you want more amazing travel tips and itineraries and things like that. I'm going to be sharing as much knowledge as possible so you guys can plan an epic trip wherever you want to go.